Hello and welcome back to Logan Sounds Off, and I am very, very excited to introduce an amazing musician known for playing with the Toy Dolls, forming the Troubleshooters, which then became Small Town Heroes, and now playing with the Stranglers. He's going to be coming soon to ForestFest on the main stage with the Stranglers on Saturday night, July 26th. And more information at forestfest.ie/main-lineup/ Make sure to check it out there. Links will be down in the description. I'm very excited to be chatting to Baz Warne. Baz, how are you keeping?
I'm very well, thank you, Logan. How are you, my friend?
I'm doing amazingly because I get to have an amazing interview today. So before we get into the conversation, for those who don't know Baz Warne, could you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Okay, I was born in Sunderland in the northeast of England. I'm 61 years of age. I formed, as you correctly said, because you've done your homework, formed a band called the Troubleshooters in the mid-80s in the northeast in Sunderland. Guitar music, out-and-out guitar music that we played was not particularly fashionable in the 1980s. In the mid-1980s anyway, there was a lot of synthesizers and different stuff, so we had a hard time getting gigs, but we just did our own thing. We got signed, and they told us that they didn't like the name, so we changed the name to Small Town Heroes, and we did that for about 8 years, with varying degrees of success. Made 2 albums, only released 1. And then in 1995, we got an offer to go on the road with a band called the Stranglers, of course, who we all loved when we were growing up. We went out and did some dates with them. And then 2 years later, in 97, we went and played with them again in Europe. By this time, they were, to me, looked like they were just going through the motions. They didn't seem to be friends with each other. They didn't even really seem to want to be there. And we did some cagey gigs with them. And then in the year 2000, I got a phone call from someone who worked for both bands, Small Town Heroes and Stranglers, telling me that they were looking for a guitar player, and would I like to have a go. So I borrowed some money because I didn't have any money because I was a guitar player. And I got on the train, went to London, got the gig on the spot. And 10 days later, we went to Kosovo to play for the United Nations peacekeeping forces because there was a war going on out there at the time. We continued as a 5-piece for 6 years until 2006. We had a separate singer. When he left, they asked me if I would be interested in singing. I kind of was and I kind of wasn't, because I always just prefer to play the guitar, to be perfectly honest. But I kind of got moved into it, and 19 years later, here I am still doing it. You know, I've actually been doing this for longer than you've been alive, young fella. That's amazing to think that, isn't it, when you think about that?
It's brilliant. And as you mentioned in your introduction, growing up in Sunderland, what kind of music were you listening to? Like as a kid, was your family very musical, or did you have many friends who were getting you into music?
Well, yeah, my mother played piano, and mum and dad sang. When they were younger, that's how they met. Actually, in the 1950s, they met at a what they call a glee club, which was they used to go and sing back in the day. And I listened, as I was growing up, to predominantly anything that had a guitar in it. So my first love, I suppose, was a band called Status Quo, who are now kind of a bit of a a pastiche almost. But back in the day, they were a really hard rocking, nasty rock and roll band, loud guitars, and anything with a guitar. And I was predominantly more into rock music than I was into punk. When punk came along, my favourite band was probably the Ruts. Do you know the Ruts? Have you heard of the Ruts?
I've heard of them, but I don't know their music. I'd say
Okay.
I probably would know a song to hear, but I don't know. I wouldn't be able to
Yeah.
name any.
Okay. Look out for a band called The Ruts, and the debut album was called The Crack. They were superior to me because they sounded fantastic, and they also had a really good guitar player, which wasn't something you could always say about those early punk bands. I was never taken by the Clash, never really taken by the Jam. I liked Steve Jones's guitar sound in the Sex Pistols, and I loved the Stranglers because it was different. So I listened to anything with a guitar, AC/DC, Chet Atkins, anything really. You can appreciate. You might not want to play those styles of music, but you can appreciate the talent that goes into doing it.
Yeah, exactly. I see what you mean. And I think that's actually really interesting because I've been thinking about this a lot recently, is that you can admire music without liking it, some stuff.
Without a
Like,
doubt. Yeah,
exactly.
yeah.
Um, and I'd love to ask you, before we get into the toy dolls and the troubleshooters and some of your earlier career, when you were in school, when you were a young teenager, did you play in many bands or did you play by yourself? When did you start getting involved and playing music with groups?
Well, again, a great question. I, like many other guitar players, I suspect every single guitar player that there's ever been started off in the bedroom, hence the term bedroom guitarists. There are many bedroom guitarists who are much, much better guitar players than me, but will never get out of the bedroom. Um, I played at home. I was encouraged to play at home. I delivered milk and newspapers as a boy and saved the money up to buy the first guitar. I used to drive my parents crazy because I would turn it up really loud. And back in the day, you had to learn to records. There was no internet or CDs or anything. So when you wanted to learn how to play a guitar lick, you would have to take the record needle off, put it back again, put it back again, put it back again, and do that 35 times. And then your father knocks on the bedroom door and says, "Will you stop doing that? You're driving everybody mad." Just kept doing it. And then a kid at school, a very good friend who I had at school, who I actually haven't seen for well over 30 years, I don't think. Him and I got guitars together and started playing at home. And then I formed a little band at school because one kid had a set of drums, which was unheard of. We couldn't get a bass player. We never managed to get a bass player. So there was two guitars and drums, and we used to do it mostly to attract girls, which worked sometimes and sometimes it didn't. And then I got my first proper guitar when I was 18, which I still have. In fact, I'm looking at it now. It's hanging on the wall. And formed a band with a couple of lads that I'd met, and that turned into the Troubleshooters. There was only three of us to start with, and then my younger brother Chris, who's a fantastic singer, he came on board to sing and play rhythm guitar, and all of a sudden we're a four-piece rock band. And we just played around the pubs and the clubs of the Northeast, and then out into London and around. We used to do a lot of gigs in Scotland. We were never lucky enough to get to Ireland. That came much later with the Stranglers for me. So yeah, music has been, ever since I saw Status Quo on Top of the Pops in 1972, when I was 8 years old. I always knew that was something that I would really like to do, and here I am, very fortunate to still be doing it.
It's really, really awesome, and I actually, it's funny where you mentioned which your first guitar. I have my first guitar just above where I am at the moment. I have it hanging on my wall, so that's that's really, really cool. But I'd love to speak about what I've read as, and I don't know, and I'd love to ask you where the Toy Dolls. You played with them for a short time. You
Yep,
recorded with them. Was that
yep.
your first time recording music? Apart from playing live, was that your first time in the studio recording songs, or was that something that you'd done before?
No, we made some demos with the Troubleshooters. And then we oh, actually no, hang on, the Toy Dolls were before the Troubleshooters, of course. You're right, and I'm wrong. See, that's what happens when you get older, Logan. Your memory starts to slip a little bit. Yes, the Toy Dolls was my first time in the recording studio, and I suspect you knew that anyway. Um,
Oh, I didn't really know.
did you
I
not?
didn't know.
Okay.
I didn't know you played in school, so I'm learning. I'm learning a lot.
Okay, okay. Well, I mean, what happened with that band was I auditioned for guitar player because there were guitar, bass, and drums, and they wanted a rhythm guitar player, and I thought, well, I can do that. They were going out and playing gigs. I mean, they were the most famous band in the Northeast at that particular time, and they were always on TV. They were always going to, far flung places to do gigs, and I thought, I'll have a bit of that. So I auditioned for guitar, and then the guy decided he didn't want to do that anymore. And then the bass player left, and he called me up, and because he liked the way I looked, because I had a big mop of spiky orange hair, he asked me if I'd like to play bass. So I played bass in the Toy Dolls for about 18 months. We recorded, we went to the United States. I was still a teenager. Just the three of us, no road crew, no road manager, just guitarist, bass player, and drummer. And it was quite a thing. It was quite an experience. And funnily enough, one of the guys that looked after us on that first American tour in January 1984 came back into my life again about 3 years ago, and we hooked up again, which was quite something. It's a long time to know someone, you know. Um,
Yeah.
So yeah, it was yeah. I did all my early recording with the Toy Dolls and on a bass guitar.
Wow, so that's really really cool. So a lot of new experiences there, and I know one thing that I was very interested by reading a BBC article, kind of reflecting on Nelly the Elephant. That sold over 500,000 copies,
Yeah,
which I was just reading that going, wow, and it was competing as well in the Christmas charts as well. And I
yeah.
wanted to ask you about your reaction to all of that, and how did you feel seeing all these copies being sold of a
Well,
cover of a nursery rhyme?
I know. It's isn't it weird? I mean,
Yeah.
I would say um, I've got mixed memories of that because just before that record was done, I left the band. So it had nothing to do with me. And I remember I was so desperate to be a musician, a rock star or a pop star or whatever you want to call us. And it really upset me to see them on Top of the Pops and on the TV doing all these things that I felt that I should have been doing. I think I recorded bass for that track, but then because I left the band, they wiped it and got somebody else to do it, so it had nothing to do with me. Years later, as you just so correctly said there, I remember thinking, well, their biggest hit was a cover of a nursery rhyme. You know, they've had a lot of success live. I don't know if you've ever seen any live footage on YouTube of the Toy Dolls. They're an awesome band. I mean, there's only three of them. You know, there's no. I mean, I think one of the most important things about being in a band, and this is what I feel about the Stranglers, is that you must have your own identity. You mustn't sound like anyone else because there's so much music around in this day and age that all sounds the same to me. It's not rubbish. It's not, but it just doesn't sound unique enough. And the Toy Dolls are very unique, even to this day. There's no one sounds like them.
Yeah, I see what you mean, and I think that's really important as a band to have that your own personal sound.
Yeah.
Um and speaking of a personal sound in a band, I'd love to move on to the Troubleshooters, which became Small Town Heroes. And I'd love to ask you about the formation of that group. And were you saying after leaving the Toy Dolls and putting that behind you, how did you set out forming this new band?
Well, I was in a pub in Sunderland one night and I bumped into a lad who I'd played with while I was in the Toy Dolls. He was in another band and the two bands used to do gigs together. He wasn't in them anymore and he was a bass player. Um, so him and I hatched a plan there and then over a few pints of beer that we were going to put a band together. Um, we jammed quite a lot, just the two of us, and ringing each other every day. It was quite exciting. He's
Yeah.
still one of my closest friends now after over 40 years. And we needed a drummer, so we've actually got the Toy Dolls' first ever drummer, who's a guy called Colin Scott, who wasn't in the band anymore. So then we had a guitar, bass, and drums. At the time, I wasn't interested in singing. I just wanted to play guitar. We wanted to be really tight, because when there's only three of you, when there's only a guitar, bass, and drums, it has to be tight. You need a good drummer to keep everything together. You need a good bass player to lock in with the drummer, and that makes my job a little bit easier. But we realised that we needed a singer, so I asked my brother if he would like to come. And this is where it gets quite a funny story, because he came down and he thought that because he was my brother, he could just join the band, whatever. But I'd given him some songs to learn and he hadn't bothered to learn them. So I just said to him, no, you're not joining the band. You didn't learn the songs. And he was really upset. He's not much younger than I am. And so we lived at home with our parents at this time, and I don't know how he did it, because we were living in the same house. But the following week, he said to me, "Are you practicing tonight?" And I said yes. And he said, "Well, can I come again and have another go?" And unbeknownst to me, he'd learned all the songs, and he came down and he was brilliant and he smashed it, and that's how the band formed. And of course, because him and I were the guitar players and we lived at home with our parents, we wrote all the songs, and it was a really good time. That's a long time ago, though, man. Yeah, it's a long time ago.
That's really interesting though. And what I loved researching about was because I was only looking at this in my collection recently, where I had interactive CDs with like videos and stuff on it. Moral Judgment, the EP that Small Town Heroes released, was one of the very early interactive CDs. I wanted
Yep.
to ask you about that EP and kind of what it was like with that new technology putting out the interactive EP, and how did you discover that?
Another great question, Logan. Another really good question. We were encouraged by the record company that we were signed with that it might be an interesting thing to explore. As far as I'm aware, I think it was the world's first interactive CD-ROM. I've got a copy somewhere. In fact, I don't even think you can play it on a computer these days anymore, because the technology is so obsolete. None of us had a computer. They were things that you only saw in science fiction movies to us back in the 1980s and 90s. So we had to go to the management office to watch it on their computer, and it had the songs on it, but it had like photographs and a little bit of video, and it wasn't anything special, but it was the first. So we did a lot of computer nerd magazine interviews where we really wanted to talk about the music, but they wanted us to talk about RAM and megabytes and all this type of thing, and that was just very alien to us. So it was a very interesting time, to be sure. I don't quite know what we got out of it, if you know what I mean. But yeah, I always remember us sitting in the office at the management company in London, watching this thing, kind of looking at each other, going, "Is this a good thing? Is this a bad thing? I don't know. I don't know what this is, you know." But yeah, a long time ago again.
I just found that very interesting to look back and kind of linking it back to my own personal collection, because I find that really, really cool. Those little, as me, as somebody who's really into music collecting, I find those little things added to records and CDs are really, really cool. And I'd love to move on to now the more important part of your career at the moment, which is playing with the Stranglers. And that first time that you were offered to audition for the Stranglers, because I know when I hear about certain bands, I kind of call back to a certain track or a certain moment. Were there any songs by the Stranglers that when you first heard, kind of resonated with you and got you into the band?
Yeah. The first one I really remember was No More Heroes. And just thinking, what a, I mean, it just didn't sound like anyone else. You know, it was angry, it was punky, but it had a keyboard in it. And the drummer was 40 years old, and it just, there were I mean, back in my day, you would have to wait for a program to come on TV called Top of the Pops. There was no internet, there was no interactive TV, there was no smart TVs. There was a handful of music programs on the telly. The best one of those days was a program called The Old Grey Whistle Test, where bands would play live, but it was on very late at night, and my parents would not let me stay up to watch it. So I would watch Top of the Pops, and when the Stranglers came on and did No More Heroes, I remember just being absolutely blown away. And then kind of you sort of we had other things. I mean, at that time I was still a schoolboy, so I had a lot of things going on in my life, and music was obviously becoming a very important part of my life. And then I left school and got a job. And I heard Golden Brown, which, even though there's only one little bit of guitar in it, the solo, it's just a timeless classic piece of music. And then when years later, when I got the job to audition, or the chance to audition, they asked me to learn 4 songs. Always the Sun, Hanging Around, No More Heroes, and Golden Brown. They left Golden Brown until the last because it's got a pretty weird guitar solo in it, which sometimes I can play and sometimes I can't. And apparently the guys that had been before me were getting all. Do you know Eddie Van Halen? Do you know the Van Halen guitar
Yep.
player? Yeah, they were getting all kind of doing this and not really being faithful to the what was required for the song. When I did it perfectly, pretty much, and got the job on the spot. And it was quite a surreal day. That was. I had to ring my then wife and tell her that I'd got the job and that I wasn't coming home for a few days. And my feet haven't really touched the ground since.
It's truly amazing, and that journey only continued to better and better things. Because I'd like to ask you, before we get into a really interesting time on Sweet 16, I'd like to ask you about, which is just an incredible name. I just want to say, even when I was reading, I just went, that is a great name for a record. But with touring, when you were first touring with the Stranglers, was that kind of something that now that you were auditioning and getting ready, it was just kind of like, okay, I'm doing this tour now? Or was it quite a surreal experience for you to be playing with this band that you admired and then being a part of the band?
It was very surreal, because what made it even more surreal was that the first concerts that I did were actually for the army and the peacekeeping for the United Nations. We went to Kosovo where there was a war, and we played for the United Nations. And at that time, nearly every nation you can think of. I mean, we played the Americans, Canadians, Brits, Finns, Swedes, Germans, French, Dutch, all these soldiers in this huge big room all together. And then they had machine guns on the floor because they were in a war zone, so they were all still wearing their uniforms just in case something happened. So you throw a rock band into the middle of that, and it was just surreal. We did 3 concerts, and then when we came back, the first public concert that I did for public was in Belgium, in the year 2000. I think it was kind of summertime. And of course, everybody by then knew that the Stranglers had a new guitar player, and everybody wanted to see who he was. So Belgium, not being that far from England, you can get to Belgium on a train from London. There was a lot of people came to see the band, with me in. And I just remember thinking, well, I can do it. You know, I'm maybe a little bit nervous, but once you see me play, hopefully I'll be accepted, and all these crazy things. And then the other side of me, I just didn't care because I was in the Stranglers, and I knew that I could do it. So, yeah, you're asking me some really good questions. This is great.
Oh, thank you very much. And hopefully this is a great question as well. I'd love to
I'm
ask
sure.
you about where you've been mentioning a couple of times beforehand, that you were more focused on playing the guitar or the bass, and not really singing, but you did change to singing duties, which became long term because you're still singing with the Stranglers today. But on Sweet 16, you split singing duties on that record. How did you find, and also playing live as well, then transitioning to this, how did you find adapting to singing as well, playing live and in the studio? Was this different playing with the Stranglers, or was it very similar?
Well, apart from first of all, the songs were very familiar. I've heard the songs so many times, both growing up and being in the band, that they kind of sink in. I mean, you play the guitar, so can you sing and play at the same time? Can you do that?
Me?
Yeah.
Oh no, no, not really. I mean, I'm terrible at singing, first of all, so I just don't really, I just don't really bother. I just like being in the background playing the guitar,
Yeah,
honestly.
yeah. Well, I did as well. But no, I just approached. I mean, first off, when we were making Sweet 16, there was a lot of trouble in the band, particularly between the singer and one of the other guys. And it became obvious as we were making the record that he wasn't interested anymore. And things came to a head with the management, and eventually he left. We'd recorded about 8 songs with him singing on them. But of course, he's not in the band anymore. So we need to replace the vocals. And they said to me, well, are you going to do it? I really hit my stride, I think, when there was a song that I presented to the band for the album called Relentless, which is the last song on the record, which has since become a big favourite. And I mean, when you're in a recording studio, very few people actually sing and play the guitar at the same time. I did all the guitars first, and then I sang later. Doing it live, I've never really had a problem with singing and playing. It's just kind of natural to me. You don't think about one thing while you're doing the other. You kind of think about them simultaneously, if that makes any sense.
Yeah.
That's a really good question, and I haven't given you a particularly good answer. I do apologise, and I was just trying to think
No,
of
that was
something.
that was a great answer. No, I see what you
Okay.
mean. It's fine. You gave a lot of insight there, Baz. And for my final question, I'd love to ask. I'm kind of jumping around a lot in this interview, but I'd love to jump to something that's happening in the future. We spoke a lot about the past, but your gig at ForestFest, and just for anybody who didn't hear at the start, the main stage Saturday night, July 26th. If you want to be there, forestfest.ie/main-lineup/ is where you want to be in the description, or if you're going to manually type it, if that's your thing, that's cool too. But I'd love to ask you about playing live, and what's going to be coming up at the gig that you think fans should know about without giving too much away.
Well, first of all, are you going to come? Are you going to be at the gig? Because I'd
I
love to
might
meet
not
you.
be. I don't think I'll be able to be there.
Ah,
I
that's a shame. That's a shame.
I'd love to meet you too. I don't know if I will be there. Hopefully I don't think so though.
Right.
Maybe
Is
another
it is
time
it
we'd be
far
able to
away
meet
from
up,
where
but
you
I
live?
don't think this time.
Do you live a bit far from where it
No, it's
is?
not it's yeah, a little bit far away, but also a lot of things are happening this month, and I've also got holidays coming up, so a lot of things are
Right. Oh,
clashing, and it's also
okay.
it's my birthday 3 days before the gig, so there's a lot of things happening. Unfortunately. Um, but
You're a busy
for those
man.
who
You're a
will be
very busy
there,
man.
for those who are lucky to be there, uh, for those who will be there, what's coming up though?
Well, we always say to expect the unexpected. We've only got 60 minutes to play, so we have to fit a lot in. Although we do play a lot of 60-minute sets, so we kind of know how to do it. We're not going to just play all the hits. We're going to do some weird stuff as well, because people need to realise and remember that the Stranglers could get pretty weird. And we're just hoping that the weather stays like it is now, and that everybody comes out and enjoys it. There's some other really good bands on. There's some friends of ours, Franz Ferdinand, Travis, people who we've played with in the past. Yeah, and it's. I mean, I'm home now for until that gig, so we've got a little bit of time off. The next gig that we're doing is actually ForestFest, so I'll be practicing a little bit of guitar and just drinking some wine in the sun and looking forward to coming to Ireland, as I always do.
It'll be really, really cool to see. For anybody who's going, I hope you're going to the Stranglers gig. So if you are going to Forest Fest, make sure that it's in your diary or your calendar so that you make sure to be there. But if you're not going, I'm glad you enjoyed the interview. I want to thank you so much, Baz, for joining me here. It's
My
really been a
pleasure.
pleasure to chat to you. You're a very interesting musicians. Thank you very much, Baz.
Thank you, Logan, and you're a very interesting young man, and I hope we get to meet one day. And keep playing the guitar as well. It's not as hard as you think. You just need to practice.
Will do, Baz. Thank you. Bye
Take care.
bye.
Bye bye.